What would you do if a wealthy stranger offered to save your dying sister on one condition, that you marry her, no questions asked? At just 24 years old, Noah Carter felt like his life had aged decades ahead of him. He was a final-year architecture student with dreams bigger than his small world. He had once imagined sketching city skylines in Paris or New York. But right now, all he could see was the cracked ceiling of a hospital waiting room. His sister Lily was sick again, worse than ever. The doctors had used words like urgent and critical. The bills in his backpack were double what his part-time job could ever cover. The rent was overdue, tuition too. His mother, Martha, worked every day under the sun selling fruit at the roadside. Her hands were cracked, her smile thinner than it used to be. She tried so hard, so did he, but hope was running out. That night, Noah sat on a bench outside the hospital, gripping a crumpled invoice. His phone buzzed. One message. Unknown number. Come to Ebony Grand Hotel. Room 905. Ask for Vivian Lancaster. You won't regret it. He stared at it for a long time. Scam? Maybe. But something in his chest stirred desperation, or maybe just the last flicker of faith in a miracle. He borrowed bus fare and went. The hotel looked like it belonged to a different world. Golden lights, uniformed staff, clean marble that didn't know the weight of dust. Room 905. He knocked. The door opened. A tall man in a black suit, face blank. Come in. Inside, the suite was quiet, elegant. Near the window sat a woman in a silk navy dress. Her posture was perfect, like she'd been raised to command silence. Her hair was grey at the edges, her eyes sharp but distant. You're Noah Carter, she said, not asking. Just knowing. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. Sit. He obeyed. Then came the words that cracked the air. I want to marry you. Noah blinked. I'm sorry. No romance, she added. No games, just business. She crossed her legs and folded her hands. I will pay all your debts. Your sister's hospital bills, your tuition, your rent. In return, you marry me. He stared at her. Was this a joke? Why me? She offered the faintest smile. Because you have nothing and everything. He didn't know what that meant. She reached beside her and placed a slim folder on the glass table. Think it over. Sign if you accept. You'll have everything you need. That night, Noah lay awake in their tiny apartment. His sister's breathing wheezed faintly from the next room. His mother had fallen asleep at the table, still in her work clothes. He stared at the folder. It felt wrong. Vivian Lancaster was older than his mother. She didn't know him. She hadn't asked about his dreams, his fears. She had looked at him like a contract, not a person. But then Lily coughed again, and Noah's heart cracked. What did he have to offer her, really? What future could he promise his family if he kept saying no to the impossible? The next morning, he sat with his mother, Martha, at their kitchen table. The sunlight through the curtain made her look older than she was. I need to tell you something, he said softly. She looked up. Is it your grades? Your job? No. And then he told her everything. About the woman, the hotel, the offer. When he finished, silence settled between them. Finally, she spoke. I've heard of her, she whispered. Vivian Lancaster. Rich, mysterious, and odd. She looked down at her hands. Do you love her? No, he said truthfully. Does she love you? No. She met his eyes, searching for something. Then why would you do this? He looked down. For Lily. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. I'm not proud of this, she said, but I know what desperation tastes like. If this is the price, then may God protect you. 3 days later, Noah signed the papers. The wedding was cold and clinical, just a judge, her lawyer, and 2 signatures. No rings, no photos, just the sound of a stamp pressing down on a future he didn't understand. That evening, a black SUV picked him up. He didn't pack much, just his drawing pencils, a spare shirt, and the sketchbook his sister gave him when he got into college. Ebong City rose ahead like something out of someone else's dream. But when they pulled up to the Lancaster estate, something shifted inside him. The house was white and towering, with walls too clean, gates too sharp. A mansion built to keep the world out. Inside, it was beautiful, but empty. The marble floors echoed. The air smelled like lavender, but it was too quiet. A maid led him to a bedroom twice the size of his old apartment. He sat on the edge of the bed. He was a married man now. And yet, he had never felt so completely alone. 3 days had passed since Noah Carter moved into the Lancaster estate, but it didn't feel like he was living there. It felt more like he had been carefully placed into a glass display. Clean, untouchable, and absolutely alone. The mansion was beautiful, yes. The kind of beauty that belonged in glossy magazines. Marble floors so polished they reflected the chandeliers. Curtains so heavy they swallowed the daylight. Every corner pristine. Every hallway wide and echoing. But beauty wasn't comfort, and comfort had not followed him into this house. He woke up every morning to silence, not peace silence. There was no smell of breakfast, no faint music from a radio, no footsteps of people going about their day. Only the hum of the refrigerator and the distant tick of the antique wall clock. 3 staff members maintained the house. A middle-aged housekeeper with sharp eyes and tight lips, a younger cleaner who barely looked up from the floor, and a tall, serious driver who only spoke when absolutely necessary. They didn't smile. They didn't ask questions. They moved like shadows, as if trained not to feel. Vivian Lancaster was nowhere to be found most of the time. Each morning, Noah came down, hoping to talk to her, hoping to make sense of what this life was supposed to be. But the housekeeper always said the same thing. "She's stepped out, sir." No explanation, no destination, no time of return. At night, he sometimes heard her heels clicking softly across the marble. Once, he waited in the hallway, just to say hello. But she passed him without a word, a queen in a kingdom of ghosts. At meals, they sat across a long dining table that could seat 20. She wore elegant silk. She sipped wine slowly. She asked polite questions about his sister's recovery, about his coursework. Never about his feelings, never about what he thought of her, never about the marriage. And when he tried to ask about her past, her family, her routines, she smiled, distant, and changed the subject. But Noah began to notice something else. The doors. Some rooms were always locked, not just closed-locked. He didn't want to pry. But curiosity is stubborn. It tugs at your sleeve even when you want to behave. One day, he gently tried a few doorknobs while walking the halls. None of them moved. Heavy locks, polished handles. Zero explanation. The third night, he stood on the balcony outside his room. The lights of Ebong City glittered in the distance like a dream behind glass. Down below, cars rushed by. Laughter drifted from somewhere. Life was happening. But not here. Here, he was just existing. Noah thought about his mother, his sister. He thought about the reason he was here. He hoped things would change after the wedding. That maybe, once the paperwork was done, Vivian would drop the act, that the house would feel less like a museum, but it hadn't. That night, as he passed by one of the locked doors, he paused. He thought he heard something, just a faint click, like someone turning a key from inside. He leaned closer. Silence. His heart tapped harder in his chest. He stepped back slowly. This house had too many secrets, and Vivian. She wasn't just private, she was hiding something. Later, alone in his room, Noah finally spoke to his mother over the phone. "She's doing better," Martha said, her voice worn but hopeful. "The doctor says Lily's responding well to the treatment, eating better, smiling more." Noah exhaled deeply. For a moment, just one, peace returned to his chest. His sacrifice meant something. But it didn't last. Because there was one thing bothering him. Vivian hadn't sent them any more money since the wedding. She had fulfilled her promise before the marriage, but nothing afterward. The hospital had called him that day, asking about the next payment. He hadn't told his mother. She already carried too much, but the silence from Vivian now felt louder than ever. A few hours later, a knock came on his door. Vivian stood there, poised, calm, dressed in a flowing dark robe that shimmered faintly in the hallway light. In her hands, a brown folder. "May I come in?" she asked. Noah stepped aside. She walked into the room like it belonged to her, which it did, technically, and sat on the armchair near the desk. "These are routine business forms," she said smoothly. "Since we're now married, some estate documents need your signature, just legal alignment." "Estate planning?" he asked, confused. "Nothing complicated," she smiled. "Formality." She stood again, already moving toward the door. "I'd appreciate it if you signed them tonight, just to keep things moving." Then she left. Noah sat there, the folder untouched. His sister's face floated through his memory. The way she clutched his hand during her last asthma attack. How she had whispered, "Don't worry, Noah, I'll be okay." He looked at the folder. He should read it. He really should. But his brain felt full, his heart heavy. So he didn't. He picked up the pen and signed. Page after page. Without reading a word. The morning after he signed the documents, Noah Carter woke up with a weight he couldn't shake. The kind that didn't come from a lack of sleep or hunger, but from knowing deep down that something had shifted. Vivian was gone again. No one told him where. The housekeeper simply said, "She stepped out, sir," then vanished behind the pantry door like a ghost. Noah sat in the grand kitchen alone, the untouched silence growing louder by the hour. He needed air, not fresh air. Just movement, something to remind him that he was still alive. So he walked. He wandered down one hallway, then another, past golden curtains and perfectly aligned vases that no one ever touched, until he reached a corridor he hadn't explored before. There, at the end, was a door different from the rest. Not fancier, simpler, older. The brass knob dulled with age. Noah reached for it, locked. But then something caught his eye. A small, thin groove in the wall nearby, barely visible unless you were looking for it. He ran his fingers along the wood. Click, the wall shifted. A hidden drawer slid open. Inside, tucked between a stack of antique books, was a key. Heavy, brass. Noah stared at it, heart suddenly racing. He tried the key in the door. It turned, the lock clicked open. The door creaked as it pushed inward, dust lifting in the soft morning light. The room smelled like cedar, and something older like forgotten memories. He stepped in slowly. Inside, time had stopped. A rocking chair sat near the window. A small table held faded picture frames. In the corner, a teddy bear sat slouched on a shelf. It was a nursery, soft pastel wallpaper peeled slightly at the corners. The room was clean but untouched for years. Noah moved toward the photos. One showed a little boy smiling beside a tall man and a graceful woman. Vivian. And the man must have been her husband. Noah felt something twist in his chest. He turned to the bookshelf. Among the children's books and framed artwork, there was a small wooden chest. He opened it. Inside, several notebooks, letters, a dusty leather-bound album. He sat on the floor, cross-legged like a child, and began to read. The journals were dated 20 years ago, written in neat, steady handwriting. They belonged to Richard Lancaster, Vivian's late husband. As Noah read, the words grew darker. What began as entries about his work and family turned into desperate confessions. Business failures, financial strain, mysterious threats. And one name kept appearing, Thomas Carter, Noah's father. His breath caught. He read more. Thomas is hiding something. The numbers don't add up. I trusted him. I don't know if I still can. If this goes wrong, Evelyn will never forgive me. Noah's hands trembled. Every page seemed to push his father further into the role of a villain. And yet, one final letter, crumpled in the back of the journal, stopped him cold. It was written by Thomas Carter himself. Richard, they're coming for you not because of me, but because of what you found. The shell company, the transfers, this is bigger than us both. I've tried to shield you, but they know. They want silence. And they think you're weak. If anything happens, please know. I never betrayed you. I tried to protect you. For her. For your son. Thomas Noah sat in stunned silence. His father hadn't stolen anything. He'd been trying to save Richard, and maybe died trying. Just then, a sound echoed down the hallway. A faint knock. Then silence. Noah stuffed the letter in his pocket and carefully closed the chest. He looked around one last time and locked the door behind him. He didn't know what this meant yet. But he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't just a pawn in someone's scheme. He was a link to a truth buried deep, wrapped in grief, guilt, and a misunderstanding that had cost lives. Back in his room, Noah pulled out his phone. He stared at the screen for a moment, then typed, "Bro, I need help. Something's wrong." He attached photos of the documents he had signed. The folder, the journals, sent them to one person he still trusted, Elijah Monroe, his childhood friend turned lawyer. A minute later, his phone buzzed. "I'm on it. Don't sign anything else. And don't tell her you found this." Noah exhaled, the tension in his chest barely shifting. He stood by the window, staring out over Ebong City. Somewhere, behind these towers and lights, was the truth, and he was done waiting for it to come to him. The morning sun crawled slowly across the Lancaster estate. But Noah Carter didn't notice. He hadn't slept. All night, he sat at his desk, phone in hand, rereading Elijah's last message. "I'm digging." "Don't tell her anything yet. Stay alert." It echoed in his chest like a warning bell. Downstairs, the housekeeper moved quietly. The cleaner swept the same corner twice. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. Especially not after the letter from his father. Especially not after reading Richard Lancaster's final words. Noah knew now this marriage had never been about saving him. It had always been about destroying him. By noon, Elijah Monroe called. Noah answered before the first ring ended. "Elijah?" His friend's voice was tight, urgent. "I've gone through every document you sent. And? Noah, you didn't just sign some estate forms." "What do you mean?" "You signed transfer of ownership over a shell company that's nearly bankrupt." Noah froze. "It's a legal trap," Elijah continued. "That company is swimming in debt. It was used to launder money, but now that it's collapsing, you're its legal face." "Not her." "Wait, what?" "Vivian Lancaster made you the owner of a sinking ship. When it crashes, and it will, you'll be left holding the wreckage." Noah's chest tightened. "But I didn't know." "She just said." "She lied, Noah. That folder was a setup. We cross-checked timestamps." "She swapped the documents after you signed." Noah dropped into the chair, breath shallow. "This is revenge," he said softly. "Exactly. But why me? Why my father?" There was a pause. Then Elijah said, I reached out to someone in the financial crimes unit. Turns out, Vivian's husband's death wasn't just a tragedy. It triggered a scandal, and the only name that came up back then was Thomas Carter. My dad. There were rumors. A failed investment. Missing funds, public disgrace, the pressure. It pushed Richard Lancaster over the edge. But my father tried to protect him. I read his letter. Vivian doesn't know that, or if she does, she's refused to believe it for 20 years. Noah stood and paced. So this marriage, it was all a plan? A quiet one. Brilliant, actually. Legal, elegant, and almost invisible. Marry you. Make you legally responsible. Disappear when it all collapses. Noah clenched his fists. He looked around the cold, perfect room. The walls, the windows, the silence. It was all a set, a stage, and he was cast as the villain in someone else's tragedy. We need to act, Elijah said. I'm backing up the files, sending everything to my cousin in internal affairs. He'll run a deeper investigation. And me, what do I do? Play along, stay calm, and don't sign anything else. She hasn't said a word since she handed me that folder. She's waiting for the fall. Elijah paused, then added, We'll stop her, but you have to hold your ground. Noah ended the call, his hand trembling. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was war. Later that afternoon, Noah stepped out of his room and walked the long corridor. Every corner of the mansion now felt like a camera lens. Every face, a mask. At the bottom of the stairs, he spotted Rosetta, the youngest house staff, usually silent, usually invisible. But now she was watching him. Their eyes met. She looked away quickly, but not before something flickered in her expression, pity. Noah hesitated, then walked over. Rosa, he said gently. She kept sweeping. Can I ask you something personal? She paused, then whispered without looking up. It's not safe to ask questions in this house, sir. Please, I just want the truth. She looked around. The hall was empty, then leaned closer, her voice barely audible. All I know is what the older staff whisper. Vivian's husband. Suicide, after a scandal. Their son vanished not long after. And Madame Vivian. She changed, became someone else. Cold. Careful, dangerous. This house used to be full of light. Now, it swallows people whole. Noah's stomach dropped. And me? Why did she choose me? Rosa stared at him, her eyes solemn. Because you're your father's son. Then she turned and walked away. That night, Noah stood on the balcony again, but this time, he wasn't lost. He was angry. And under the stars, gripping the letter from his father, he made a vow. You tried to protect him. Now, I'll protect us both. The house had changed. Not physically, its walls were still white, the chandeliers still sparkled, and the marble still shone like glass. But something invisible had shifted. Noah Carter could feel it in the way the staff moved around him. Quieter. Faster. Eyes that used to avoid him now darted his way with something different. Caution. Or maybe fear. Vivian Lancaster hadn't spoken to him since the night she brought the folder. But this silence, it wasn't forgetfulness, it was deliberate. She was watching, waiting. And Noah knew time was running out. He tried to act normal. He ate breakfast, walked the garden, answered polite questions from the housekeeper. But inside, he was boiling. Vivian had used him, turned his love for his family into a weapon, made him a legal scapegoat for a company drowning in debt. All because of a misunderstanding, or worse, a refusal to face the truth. But what haunted him more than the betrayal was that for a moment, he'd trusted her. Somewhere deep down, he had hoped there was a human beneath the cold elegance. A woman who had once loved, once laughed, but she was gone, replaced by a shadow in silk. That night, Noah packed a small bag. He couldn't stay any longer. He had to get out, get to Elijah, get to the police, get to anyone who could help stop this. He opened his door quietly and stepped into the hallway, and that's when he saw them. Two men, dressed in black, standing at the end of the hall, near the staircase. Broad shoulders, no expressions. They began walking toward him. Noah turned. Too late. One of them spoke calm and firm. "Where do you think you're going, Mr. Carter?" Noah backed away. I was just... The other man cut in. "Come with us." They didn't raise their voices, didn't pull weapons. They didn't need to. Power this clean doesn't scream, it whispers. They escorted him down the stairs, past the quiet dining room, into a room he hadn't entered before. A study. Dark wood shelves. A desk that looked like it hadn't been touched in weeks. Vivian stood by the window, her back to him. She didn't turn around. Only said, "You were trying to leave." Noah swallowed. "Yes." She finally turned. Calm, as always. Her voice was even. "So you found out?" Noah didn't answer. "You read the papers?" "Spoke to your lawyer." Still, he said nothing. She walked closer, her heels tapping gently on the hardwood floor. "Let me guess. You think I'm cruel, wicked, a villain in a story you don't understand." He met her eyes. "You made me the face of a failing company. You lied to me. You tricked me." She raised an eyebrow. "I offered you salvation. You offered me a sentence." Vivian's smile faltered, just slightly. "Your father destroyed my family." "My father tried to protect your husband," Noah snapped. "He died trying." A flicker of something passed through her eyes, conflict perhaps, or pain, but it was gone just as fast. "He died a traitor." "No, you chose to believe that, because it was easier than facing the real story." Silence. Then she nodded to the guards. "Take him to the West Wing." Noah's stomach dropped. The West Wing always locked. Always silent. He didn't resist. There was no point. The room was small, bare, a bed, a chair, and a single window too narrow to crawl through. The door locked behind him with a soft, final click. He sat down. The silence pressed on his chest like weight. But then his phone buzzed. Elijah. Noah scrambled to answer. "Are you safe?" Elijah's voice came fast. "She's locked me in a room." "We're out of time," Elijah said. "I've got the evidence." Video surveillance, signed statements, even a confession draft she didn't think anyone would find. "Then what do we do?" "You wait." "I'm coming to you." "What? Elijah, no! I have backup. My uncle's in internal affairs." "The warrant is signed. Stay calm." The call ended. Noah stared at the screen, heart pounding. Somewhere beyond the walls, justice was coming. Hours passed. He didn't sleep. Then, in the early morning light, he heard it. Tires, voices. The gate creaking open. Footsteps. A sharp knock. The door swung open. Elijah stood there. Behind him, two officers. One held a folder, the other a badge. "Noah Carter, you're free to go." In the study downstairs, Vivian sat motionless as the warrant was read aloud. Fraud, document forgery, financial manipulation. She didn't argue, didn't cry. She looked at Noah. For the first time, there was no coldness in her eyes. Only exhaustion. Maybe even shame. He said nothing. And somehow, that silence hurt more than any words could. The Lancaster mansion had never felt more still. After all the whispers, locked doors, and secrets folded neatly behind designer curtains, it had gone quiet for real this time. Vivian Lancaster was gone, not disappeared. Not hidden behind layers of silk and silence. gone in handcuffs, escorted by internal affairs. Noah Carter had watched her leave without a word. She hadn't resisted, hadn't even flinched. Just one long, haunting look as the door closed behind her. And now the house wasn't just cold, it was hollow. Noah stood alone in the hallway that had once intimidated him. He had arrived here with a borrowed shirt, an empty bank account, and a head full of pressure. Now he stood with the truth, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. He thought about packing, thought about walking away from everything. But something kept him there. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe, after everything, it felt wrong to leave a story unfinished. 2 days later, a delivery arrived. A plain brown envelope, hand-delivered by the estate lawyer. No return address, the man had said, but we both know who sent it. Inside was a handwritten letter. Folded neatly. Noah recognized the ink before he even opened it. Vivian. Noah, if you're reading this, then I'm exactly where I deserve to be. Don't pity me. I lived my life clutching the wrong kind of truth. Revenge had become my religion, and you unfortunately became my altar. I told myself I was right. That your father ruined me, that your presence in my life was poetic justice, but I never asked questions. I never searched deeper. I was too proud, too broken, too used to pain to believe in any other explanation until you stood in that room and didn't hate me. That silence, Noah, that broke something in me. You should have screamed, but you didn't. You did something braver. You stayed human, and now I must do the same. In my will, I've transferred full ownership of my estate to you. The company, the house, the accounts. But it's not wealth I leave you, it's a request. Find my son. His name is Caleb. He ran away after Richard's death. I haven't heard from him in nearly 2 decades. I don't know where he is, if he's alive, but if there's any chance, any flicker, I don't want to die with that question unanswered. Find him, Noah, not for me, but for the version of me that could have loved him better. Vivian Noah sat in the library with the letter on his lap, his fingers trembling. Of all the endings he had imagined to this story, this wasn't one of them. She had hated him. Used him, then handed him everything, not for redemption, but for closure. Later that evening, Noah visited his mother's small apartment for dinner. Martha Carter had always seen through noise. As she ladled soup into his bowl, she asked, "What's next, son?" He placed the letter beside her. She read it in silence. When she finished, she folded it carefully and looked up. "You're going to find him, aren't you?" Noah nodded. "She hurt us, but she was hurting too. That house," she added softly. "Still yours?" "Legally, yes." She took his hand. "Then don't run from it, heal in it. Let Lily feel something soft for once." He swallowed the lump in his throat and nodded again. The next week moved slowly. Noah began sorting through Vivian's documents, sold records, newspaper clippings, company files. With Elijah's help, he also hired a private investigator. They searched school enrollment logs, adoption agencies, police reports, and one name kept surfacing. Caleb Lancaster. Born 18 years ago, vanished at age 10. No formal sighting since. Until Elijah called one rainy morning. "I think we found him." "What? Where?" "Small town near the border. School teacher. No ID before age 10. Goes by the name Kofi. Quiet life. Doesn't ask questions." Noah didn't hesitate. He packed a bag, kissed Lily's forehead, and got on the next bus out of the city. He found him behind a school, sitting under a tree, watching children run barefoot through puddles. The man looked up, early 30s, soft eyes, same jawline as Vivian. Noah walked closer. "Kofi?" The man stood slowly. "Yes? My name is Noah Carter. I think I know who you are." They sat beneath that tree for an hour. Noah told him everything. The truth. The lies. The woman who had lost her way and had left behind one final act of grace. Kofi listened, didn't cry, just nodded slowly. "I remember the shouting," he said. "The night Dad died, I thought it was my fault." "I ran." He looked down. "And I stayed gone." The next morning, they traveled together. Back to the city. Back to the prison. Vivian Lancaster looked older when they brought her in. Her hands shook. Her face was pale. But when her eyes met Kofi's, something inside her lit up. She reached through the glass. "My boy," she whispered, "you're alive." Kofi pressed his hand to hers. "I'm here now." She turned to Noah, eyes glistening. "Thank you." Noah said nothing. He didn't need to. He simply nodded, and the room exhaled. The day after they visited Vivian in prison, the air in the Lancaster mansion felt different. Not colder, just quieter. Like the walls, finally, had nothing left to hide. Noah Carter stood alone in the grand study, the same place where he'd once been dragged, the same place where Vivian had looked him in the eye and said, "Someone has to pay." Now, she had paid in full. But instead of anger, Noah felt only one thing. Clarity. Across the room sat Caleb Lancaster, or Kofi, as he'd been known for the past 2 decades. He wore simple clothes, the same shoes he had taught schoolchildren in. His voice was calm, his posture humble, but the weight behind his eyes that hadn't changed. It mirrored Noah's: pain, confusion, a desire for peace. They sat in silence, listening to the grandfather clock tick like a patient metronome. Then Noah spoke. "It's all yours." Caleb looked up, startled. "What?" "The house, the company, the accounts, all of it. Your mother left it in my name, but she meant it for you. You don't have to." "Yes," Noah interrupted. "I do." For a moment, Caleb didn't answer. Then he leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes locked on Noah's. "You could have taken it all," he said quietly. "I did," Noah admitted, "for a moment, but the truth doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the people who lived it." "And what about you?" Noah smiled gently. "I'm not walking away with nothing. I'm walking away with peace." The next morning, Noah stood in the estate lawyer's office. A thin man in horn-rimmed glasses flipped through documents, each signature more final than the last. Noah signed them all. Transfer of estate, power of attorney, company ownership, bank rights. It was done. Later, as he stepped out into the fresh air, Elijah Monroe met him on the sidewalk. "So it's official?" Elijah asked. "Every paper signed. You're sure this is what you want?" "It's not about what I want anymore," Noah said. "It's about what's right." Elijah nodded, proud, then teased, "You always did have a flair for the dramatic." Noah laughed. The first real one in weeks. That evening, back at the mansion, Caleb greeted him with a set of spare keys. "You can still stay here, you know," Caleb offered. "I appreciate it, but it's time." Time for what? To start something new. Noah's decision surprised many. He didn't take a single car, not a coin of the estate. What he took was simpler and somehow more powerful: a suitcase with his clothes, a notebook filled with sketches, and his sister Lily, finally healthy again, seated beside him in the back of a taxi. Martha Carter had been waiting at the apartment. Her eyes welled with tears as Noah stepped through the door. "You gave it all up?" she whispered. He nodded. "You did the right thing, didn't you?" "Yes." She hugged him tight. And for the first time since his father died, Noah felt whole. A week later, Caleb called. "I'm staying in the house," he said, "but not just to live in it." What do you mean? I want to make it mean something again. How? Caleb hesitated. A foundation, he said, in our fathers' names. Thomas Carter and Richard Lancaster. Yes, a space for dreamers. For people like us, to get a second chance. Noah was quiet for a long time, then said, "Count me in." The Carter-Lancaster Foundation opened 3 months later. A restored wing of the estate became its headquarters. The courtyard, once echoing with silence, now rang with laughter and possibility. Young men and women filled the halls, architects, coders, writers, teachers. Some of them had been homeless. Some of them had been imprisoned by circumstance. All of them had been told they didn't belong. Now they did. Noah took the back office. He didn't need a title. He preferred building things in quiet corners. One afternoon, he sat with Lily, showing her blueprints for a community library. She looked up at him, eyes bright. "You're different now," she said. "How?" "You're not trying to fix everything. You're just living." He smiled. She was right. Sometimes he visited Vivian, not often. But enough. In prison, she had softened. Her eyes no longer sharp, her voice no longer icy. They spoke of small things, books, recipes. The color of the sky in different cities. She never asked for forgiveness, and Noah never gave it in words. But one day, as he stood to leave, she touched his hand lightly and whispered, "You found him." He nodded. "And he found you." Vivian closed her eyes and smiled. By spring, the Carter-Lancaster Foundation had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What started as a quiet effort to honor 2 fathers had become a movement. Dozens of young people were applying every week, single mothers hoping for scholarships, former inmates learning new trades, teenagers from broken homes finding mentors. And at the heart of it stood Noah Carter and Caleb Lancaster, 2 sons once trapped by secrets, now builders of second chances. The media called it the mansion that saved lives. Journalists loved the angle. The heir who gave everything away, the long-lost son who returned to rebuild. But not everyone was cheering, because not everyone wanted light to spread. One Monday morning, Elijah Monroe burst through the foundation's glass doors with a stack of papers in hand. He found Noah in the back office, sketching a blueprint for a youth center. "We've got a problem," Elijah said. Noah looked up. "You always say that with that face. This time I mean it." He dropped the folder on the desk. "Someone's filing an injunction to freeze the foundation's assets." "What?" Caleb walked in, having overheard. "Why would anyone do that?" Noah asked. "Because you're making noise," Elijah said flatly, "and noise scares the people who benefit from silence." The paperwork showed a familiar name, Brent Kavanaugh. Noah's jaw tightened. Brent had once been Vivian's silent partner, a man who had profited from the shell companies she used to funnel money, a man who had vanished when she was arrested. Now he was resurfacing with lawyers and accusations, claiming the foundation was built on illegally transferred assets, that the house, the land, and the non-profit all belonged to him through prior arrangements. "He's bluffing," Noah said. "Maybe," Elijah replied, "but he's dangerous, and he's not working alone." 2 weeks later, a local newspaper ran a headline, "Philanthropy or Fraud? Foundation faces legal storm." Then came the anonymous letters, false audits, even vandalism at one of their outreach centers. But Noah had learned by now, silence was a choice, and he wouldn't choose it again. At the next press conference, he stood behind the podium with Caleb and Elijah beside him. The cameras flashed, the microphones crowded the front row. Noah looked into the lens and said, "We are not afraid. This foundation exists because too many people were ignored, exploited, or left behind by systems that protect the powerful. If we're being targeted, it means we're doing something right. We won't stop." He stepped back. The room applauded, but the fight had only begun. Behind closed doors, Elijah worked with whistleblowers. He uncovered documents showing that Brent Kavanaugh had ties to half a dozen shell corporations. One of them, the same company Vivian had tried to offload onto Noah, had been legally dissolved years before. The revival was a fraud. The injunction was false, but that wasn't enough. We need more than defense, Elijah told them. We need to go on the offense. Expose everything. That night, Caleb returned to his mother's journals. He hadn't touched them since she'd been arrested. But maybe the answers were still there in the margins, the notes, the forgotten pieces of her pain. And there it was, tucked between pages of a 2006 ledger, a USB drive, old, dusty, forgotten. He plugged it in, and what they found changed everything. Emails, bank transfers, audio recordings. Vivian had recorded a private meeting between herself and Brent just weeks before she approached Noah with the marriage offer. In the recording, Brent laughed. "If he signs, you're free. And I get my cut. Win-win, right?" Vivian's voice. "He's just a boy. His sister's dying." "Then he'll sign faster," Brent had replied coldly. The truth was no longer speculation. It was digital. It was documented. It was time. A month later, Brent Kavanaugh was indicted on federal charges of fraud, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. The injunctions were dropped. The foundation's name was cleared. Noah and Caleb didn't celebrate with champagne. They reopened the center that had been vandalized. They rebuilt the youth library twice the size. They hosted an open house and watched as families, volunteers, and students filled the halls again. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Caleb stood on the steps of the estate and looked out over the garden. Noah joined him. "You think it's over?" Caleb asked. "No," Noah said. "But we're no longer running." Caleb smiled faintly. "Funny, isn't it?" "What?" "All this came from pain, from a lie, and we turned it into something true," Noah finished. They stood in silence, and for the first time, the mansion didn't feel like a monument to tragedy. It felt like home. It was a Thursday when the call came, just after 7 a.m. As the sky over Ebong City began to stretch itself into color, Noah's phone buzzed quietly on the windowsill. He almost ignored it. But something in his chest stirred. He picked up. "Mr. Carter? This is Warden Elise from Brookside Correctional Facility." A pause. Noah stood still. "I'm sorry to inform you Vivian Lancaster passed away early this morning." The words landed like winter, not sharp, just cold. Quiet. A stillness that spread through his bones before his brain could catch up. "She didn't suffer," the warden said gently. "A stroke, they believe. Peaceful, quick." Noah thanked her, then sat in silence for a long time. Caleb found him on the terrace 20 minutes later. Noah didn't need to say it. Caleb's shoulders dropped, his jaw clenched, but his eyes remained calm. "She's at peace now," Caleb whispered. Noah nodded, maybe for the first time in 20 years. They held a small memorial. No press, no guests, just the two of them, the prison chaplain and a small headstone beneath a flowering tree on the east edge of the facility. Vivian had no other family, no will updates, no last-minute estate changes. But that wasn't surprising. She had said everything she needed to, or so they thought. 2 days later, a manila envelope arrived at the Carter Lancaster Foundation, addressed simply to be opened only upon my death, VL. Inside was a handwritten letter. Long, elegant cursive, folded once. Caleb read the first line silently, then passed it to Noah, hand shaking. Noah took a deep breath. And read. "To my sonson by blood, the other by consequence. If this letter reaches you, I have gone where pride can no longer speak for me. I leave behind no jewels. No apologies, no rewritten history. Only this truth. I spent most of my life punishing people for a crime I never fully understood. I turned grief into architecture, layered it with silence, decorated it with control. And in the process, I forgot how to love. But you reminded me. Noah, you were never my enemy. You were my mirror, a boy trying to save his family, the same way I once tried to save mine. You walked into my trap with nothing but a backpack and a breaking heart, and still found room to show me mercy. That will haunt me in the best way. Caleb, my son, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I barely deserve your memory, but I see you now, even through the cracks I made. There is a box in the nursery, the one no one ever opened. Inside is the only thing I couldn't bring myself to burn. Your drawings. Your letters. Your childhood frozen in time. Let it thaw. Let it live. And let both of you build something that doesn't have to hurt to be true. I loved you. In my way. Flawed. Late. But real. Vivian. They didn't speak for a long time after Noah finished reading. Caleb stood, walked to the old wing of the mansion, the nursery, the same room where Noah had once uncovered the first secret that started it all. The door creaked open softly. He found the box tucked beneath the crib, dusty, untouched. He knelt, opened it, and there it was, a child's scrawl of rockets, castles, smiling faces labeled Mama and Papa, a birthday card that read, "Don't cry today, Mama, I love you bigger than the moon." Tears blurred the ink. Caleb pressed his forehead to the wood and wept for the boy he had been, the mother he never stopped wanting, and the future he still had. That night, Noah and Caleb sat on the front steps of the mansion, watching the lanterns glow in the garden. "She could have destroyed both of us," Caleb said. "She almost did," Noah replied. "But instead, she brought us together." They sat in silence until Noah spoke. "Let's build something in her name." "Are you serious?" "Not to glorify her past," Noah said, "but to honor what she tried to fix before the end." Caleb looked out at the stars, then nodded slowly. "Okay." They called it the Evelyn Project. Not a foundation, not a charity, but a listening space. A trauma center designed not just for therapy, but for healing between generations. Mothers and daughters, fathers and sons. People who had hurt each other and still wanted a way back. The irony wasn't lost on them. But maybe that was the point. Sometimes the only redemption left is making space for someone else's. The sky above the Carter Lancaster estate had begun to turn gold. Not the kind of gold that blinds, but the kind that warms. Down in the courtyard, laughter echoed, children chasing one another through the open garden paths, their feet kicking up soft clouds of dust. Inside, volunteers arranged chairs in neat rows beneath white canopies, and on the steps of the old mansion stood Noah Carter and Caleb Lancaster, dressed not in suits, but in shirts with rolled sleeves and quiet pride. It had been 1 year since Vivian Lancaster's passing, 1 year since pain was finally met with peace. And now, her legacy, no longer a burden, had become something else entirely. A bridge. The Evelyn Project had grown. From a single counseling center in the East Wing, it had expanded into a network of healing spaces. There were now writing workshops for teens with incarcerated parents, restorative justice circles for broken families, group sessions for estranged siblings, spouses, and caretakers. Some cried. Some forgave. Some simply sat quietly relearning how to breathe again, and somehow that was enough. Today they were dedicating a new wing, the Room of Second Chances. Not a grand hall, not a marble museum, just a bright sunlit room with wooden floors and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Every person who walked through its door was given one thing: a pen, a notebook, and a question. What will you build from what broke you? As the guests began to arrive, Noah stepped away from the crowd and looked out toward the city skyline. It was the same view he had once stared at through locked windows, back when he was just a desperate student signing papers in silence. Back when love was a risk and trust felt like a luxury. Now, it felt earned. Caleb walked up beside him, holding 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "They're asking for you," he said. "You're the speaker, remember?" Noah laughed softly. "I was hoping they'd forget." "Not a chance." They clinked glasses, the sound light, crisp and full of memory. When Noah stepped up to the podium, he didn't carry notes. He looked out at the crowd, some familiar, some new. He spotted Rosa Bennett, the former housekeeper, now a full-time coordinator for family services. Elijah Monroe, seated proudly beside his pregnant wife. Martha and Lily Carter in the front row, smiling with quiet joy. And he saw the empty seat in the second row, where Vivian might have sat if time had been kinder. He began. "A year ago, this house was full of silence. Not the good kind, the kind that creeps into your bones and makes you forget how to speak. It was built by pain, inherited by pain, and for a while passed on like an unspoken curse. But pain doesn't have to be permanent, and silence doesn't have to be sacred. We're here today because people made the brave choice to speak, to forgive, to stay. And from those choices, this place, this community, was born again." Applause came gently, not with thunder, but with gratitude. Noah stepped down, and Caleb joined him. Together, they led the crowd into the new wing. Each guest took a pen and a journal. Some wrote names, some wrote confessions. Some wrote nothing at all. But no one left empty-handed. That evening, long after the guests had gone and the lanterns had dimmed, Noah sat under the tree near the west garden. He opened his own notebook. Inside were just a few words, written days earlier. This began as survival. It became redemption. Now it's legacy. He closed the book, leaned back, and looked at the stars. Caleb joined him a few minutes later, a cup of tea in hand. They sat in companionable silence, until Noah spoke. "Think it'll last?" Caleb looked at the house, now lit with warmth and laughter. "Not if we build it to impress." "But if we build it to heal?" Noah asked. Caleb smiled. "Then it just might outlive us." As the night deepened and the world quieted, Noah and Caleb sat side by side. Not brothers by blood, but by battle, by truth, and by the choice to carry what was broken, not with bitterness but with grace. And in that choice, they had rewritten the ending, not just of their story, but of a legacy that once lived in silence. Now it sang. In a world that often rewards power, silence, and revenge, the story of Noah Vivian reminds us that healing rarely comes from punishment, but from truth, grace, and the courage to let go. We see a young man, burdened by debt and desperation, walk into a trap laid by a grieving woman blinded by decades of pain. But instead of choosing bitterness, he chooses empathy. And in doing so, he breaks a cycle that could have consumed generations. This story teaches us that forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing the past. It's about refusing to let the past control the future. Noah didn't reclaim his dignity by winning in court. He reclaimed it by honoring his own values, even when no one was watching. For older adults who have lived through decades of change, loss, and family wounds, Noah Vivian speaks to something deeper. The belief that it's never too late to make peace, not just with others, but with ourselves. Because sometimes, the greatest legacy we leave isn't what we build, but what we choose to release.